Holland, this movie, come on, this takes the temperature of a horror film to a completely different level.
It gets weird.
It does get weird. So that means we have to start at the very beginning then, creating with Laurence, because as a writer-director, this was his first effort, was it not?
It was his first effort as a director that it wasn't at Columbia and with various friends at film school. So I was elated that I was able to get my hands on the script and that he was interested in my take on it. Of playing these two characters in this one movie, a 65-year-old and who is my spouse's mother as well as his girlfriend.
So now, did you have to go through a split personality test or anything like that? Because I mean, I do a thing that I call transitioning, and I believe that we all have different mindsets and mood swings and things, and that we can be several different people at the same time. What did you experience by being on that camera like that?
Well, so our preparation was Laurence as well as his partner Daisy were seeing a Buddhist guide named Katie, as Buddhist guides are named. But there's a famous school in Colorado that she attended for several years, and Laurence had recommended me seeing. She's like a therapist meets a life coach with a lot of Buddhist principles thrown in there, and I jumped on board with it and said, yeah, I would absolutely love to take some sessions with her. And it was interesting that I think Laurence did have a plan, because the bardo of the situation of, is this soul, who is this mother not ready to leave Earth because she has unfinished business with her son, kept working its way into our sessions. And so it became the most unique preparation that all three of us had used a Buddhist guide. We joked that she should come to set to prepare for this film.
Oh my God. When you start messing around with Buddhism, because I study Buddhism, and I know how everything is connected from the past into the present into the future. It's all one.
Yep. And the water and the fire earth. And so we talked in terms of what is Anya versus what is Tracy. And obviously with Anya being a grounding and no makeup and didn't like to show her body,
right?
The sort of modern day feminist, so to speak. And then you had Tracy, a woman of also New York, but the 1970s with the tight clothing and the disco era and the lipstick. And I loved that all of these things that an older person, when they pass, they do tend to potentially hoard, or that is connected to a memory. And is it that who is the manipulative person in this relationship? And I like that you begin in a traditional sense or a conventional sense, so to speak, of like, hey girl, go get a new dude. But as the movie progresses, if he's a bit short with her, I love that transition where you go, oh no, has she been taking us all for a ride, including the audience?
Wow.
You can view this through two lenses, one very logistical, and then one, through the supernatural.
It does take you for a ride, because after I saw the movie, the thing that happened, my mother appeared in my dream, and and the thing is she kept stealing things from me and then giving it away, and I kept going, that's my stuff. And her comment made me wake up in my dream, yeah. And her comment woke me up immediately, because she goes, "What? You don't want me to have friends? This is how I have friends, by giving your stuff away." It's like, oh my God, this movie, it haunted me.
Laurence knew what he was doing, I think, when the people that we've spoken to about this movie that have been able to see it's such a mirrored effect. And everybody has, most people at least at a certain age, we have a loved one we've lost.
Yeah.
And that process of going through their things, and it is haunting, and it's incredibly personal and vulnerable. And so I'm not surprised that you don't want to reach in someone's soul and say like, hey, be careful if you watch this film. But I think vulnerability is a great thing, and it brings us together. And so I think that Laurence told a great story about telling a personal story that everybody can relate to, with a loved one in their family, and even more so their moms.
Well, it's relatable because you're right. When it comes to family, when it comes to close friends, they are such a part of who we are as human beings. Well, through Buddhism, remember we're growing into each other. We met in a different lifetime. We're just doing it right here, and we're recognizing it. But the fact that this is the thing that really haunted me in the very beginning. A boy's best friend is his mother, and I thought, how did anybody find that out about me? Of course I love my mother. My mother was my best friend and still is my best friend.
Well, and what I love about this movie is we see a lot of mother-daughter relationships on camera. We don't see a ton of mother-son relationships on camera. And so I love that Laurence, who's an incredibly sensitive soul, wanted to talk about that and tell it through this lens of a mushroom trip through his girlfriend and that icky feeling where you're like, oh, like that's the biggest horror film is when you have to think about your mother sexually. I mean, that's just something that literally that nervous laugh is that's the reaction they're gonna get out of everybody. Like, oh, what? And so that's where he went of that's a horror film. And so, you know, that's the button that Laurence wanted to push is somebody that is shut down or not very communicative. And Anya thinks that's, as do I am of the same belief. Anya and I are similar in that sense that communication is key and opening up, and we're only as sick as our secrets. And I did not have a hard time connecting to Anya in that sense. I had a harder time connecting to Tracy and how she can treat her child like that. And the mothers in the world that are just so narcissistic that they can't reach outside of themselves to love their child even if they want to, and exploring. I had to have a lot of empathy for Tracy. That's what I had to really fight for in this film, because behind narcissism is usually just a lot of insecurity and a lot of abandonment, and that's ultimately what Tracy, you could hopefully feel. I played her in the sense of that she really wanted to love her child, but what happens to those women that have children that weren't meant to have a child? And that's ultimately what Tracy comes to terms with, is that she made a mistake having a child, but that child's now here and very, very much breathing.
Yep. The movie we're talking about is Mother May I, which is going to be in theaters and on demand. I would love, and I wish that somebody would do this. I'd love to see this movie in the 4DX movie theater where the seats move, and because that house creeps me out, and then the ballerina dance. Come on.
Oh, I don't even know about this thing. The seats move in a movie theater?
Oh my God! Yeah, it's when it comes to any type of action-packed movie. I mean, it's like going into an amusement park, and I mean they shoot water out at you if it's snowing. Then the temperature changes. You can feel the breeze in the show and everything. Oh, but it's called 4DX.
4DX. I'll have to check that out. Yeah. Well, you might not. You know, it's very the psychological quiet horror film. Because of the context that, you know, anything, when she would touch him, we were very careful of choosing precious moments of like when she would touch him, how she would touch him.
Right.
It got very like icky, very personal of the last thing that any man wants to think about. And then Emmett, who already doesn't communicate to begin with, is now forced into the situation, and he thinks it's an act. And he's having to play with that, you know, mind game with himself, where the second he starts to feel bad for Anya, did something happen to her, he finds a journal open where it's like, oh my gosh, did she already get a hold of this? And that's why she's acting like that. So the mind game, the puzzle aspect of this movie, in addition to the vulnerability of it, is really what drew me to it.
Yeah, you're not going to sit in the same place all the way through this movie. You're going to lean on one side, lean to the other side. You're going to sink down in your chair. You're going to be physically moving while you watch this movie.
It's the goal. It's definitely make people's skin crawl.
Yeah.
Literally, but with the bug aspect as well, with the cicadas.
And what's so fascinating about this movie, Mother May I, coming out right now, this has been the year that everybody's been talking about. We need to start moving toward mushrooms for medication, and it needs to be a part of our lives. And here comes this movie. I'm going, I don't know now. I think maybe I need to really make sure I do some better research.
Know your source. Yeah, I mean, How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan, like huge fan. And I had recently read that book, as well as The Immortality Key, which is also a book about psilocybin, and there was a fungus that grew on wheat back in biblical times, and how much that has affected the King James Bible. So I think that this all pulls from that same sort of just head scratching question, is how are psychedelics hurting us or helping us?
Yeah.
And using them as therapy. And I'm really fascinated by it. I do believe like the war on drugs kind of dampened our openness to, at least as Americans. to using this as a cathartic experience.
You're so right about that, because I mean, when you really dig deeper into the psychedelics and stuff, because we all have this vision of the old hippie days and everything. You guys aren't hippies in this movie, Mother May I. You're everyday average people that just happen to go through an experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I've never lived in New York and certainly not Brooklyn, obviously, but I connected to the generation as millennials that are trying to be more open than their parents were. And they're definitely everyday people. They're the progressive everyday people that are open to it. But I appreciated the fact that Laurence let everything stay really subtle and natural. And our makeup took 5 minutes as Anya. It was great. And the house itself is such a gem that it was a converted dairy barn. We actually slept in the picture house because we didn't have enough money for the lodging plus picture house plus driving every day and our rental cars or drivers. So we all just piled in there and kind of slept in like a little nook, and they were sweet enough to give Kyle and I the 2 main rooms with doors, because a lot of them were like loft style, with little shades in front of the beds. And so it was quite the summer camp experience for 5 weeks. And Kyle is a big cook, and he would make and so Laurence is an incredible Italian cook, and so he and Laurence Vannicelli, the director. So he would make, I have a new way of making salad, and you put the dressing at the bottom of the bowl first, then you put all the lettuce in, and then just salt, and you toss it from the bottom, not the top.
Oh, wow.
And it is the best way I have had salad. And it's all it is. The dressing is just olive oil, lemon juice, and crushed garlic.
Ooh.
That is it.
Ooh.
And you put at the bottom, then the lettuce, then the salt on top, then mix. And it is so good. It tastes like that restaurant salad. So yeah, the family meals, it was very much art imitates life in that sense, that, we were stuck in a house together for 5 weeks, and there was it was very blurred as to when the day ended. I mean, the camera stopped rolling. That was really the only indication that the day was actually over, and we would all have a glass of wine and family meal afterwards. So it was a very intimate experience all around.
See, this is the type of Hollywood that I love most, when we don't get to see what happened and then you share it. Because when you've got that kind of togetherness on the set of a movie, this is going to hang with you guys for the rest of your life. This was absolutely a moment.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Gallner is indie king. I mean, Dinner in America, he's got a movie called The Passengers coming out. He is genuinely one of the best actors. I was elated. I was pinching myself. And at the same time, I'm like, well, Laurence wrote an incredible puzzle of a head trip. And so I'm not surprised he's coming on, but I just didn't think I'd get a chance to act with him. I was such a fan of Dinner in America. And so when he came on, he just kind of led the pack as far as being the chef, and even taught me how to cut vegetables properly. So we're lucky to have Kyle. And he said, after all the indie movies he's been a part of, I said, have you ever slept in your picture house though with the director and his partner upstairs? Laurence and Daisy took one for the team because it was 85 degrees like at night, and they were sleeping up in like the 3rd story loft. So they were legitimately sleeping in 90 plus temperatures every night. And I don't know how the hell they were able to sleep, but they were. And I would soak my clothes in a bathtub and then get in bed and go to bed with like soaking wet clothes on, because I needed cold to sleep. I'm not a very high maintenance person, but when it comes to sleeping, 100% I will admit I'm high maintenance, and I need it to be an ice bath. And so, because we had no air conditioning.
Yeah.
And so, and our poor makeup artist, oh, she was amazing, just having to sop up the sweat. But yeah, everyone slept, the DP, the producers, almost everybody except for a couple of the producers were sleeping in that house every night. So it was just Kyle said it was a wild experience. He, the indie king, had not even experienced that.
Wow.
So it was actually quite a joyous group that were obsessed with Tony's chocolates, and we would nickname Tony's chocolates. And there was a guy, Nick Robinson, that we would watch at night, these comedy sketches. And so it was quite jubilant when the camera stopped rolling.
Wow. What about the waking up hours? Because you know how we are as creative people. We don't always wake up the person that everybody's saw us the night before. Because I'm a daily writer. The first thing that I have to do is I have to write before I speak to anybody else.
Wow. Well, what's interesting is because it was such a casual schedule, but we still had to obviously stay on track. We did have some leeway that I've never experienced on a set of when we could start. And some of them, in the beginning, they were early. I like it when we have early shoots in the beginning, but then as you move in, you're getting more tired, working 14-hour days.
Yeah.
And we even had days that we could kind of be creative with the schedule if the call, we still had call sheets. We stayed professional in that sense, but we were able to move things around a lot easier being in just essentially one location. We even were Googling lakes that would, we go like, hey, maybe on the weekend though, can we just we won't be able to, schedule this with the drive, but maybe on the weekend, let's go get a really clear lake shot. And so when you have all the cameras at your disposal, literally everyone's there all the time. And we all believe in the project. We didn't end up getting this cool, really beautiful see-through lake that was like 2.5 hours away, but we could have. And so there was a certain flexibility there that it was definitely the most special movie experience I've ever had.
So when you played a double role like you did, how do you film that? It can't be in chronological order. I mean, how did you build that?
Laurence tried to do as much as possible in chronological order, but it was not.
Okay.
He did. And because most of our locations were one location, and just several different spots at the dairy farm, the converted dairy farm, barn, I should say. And so, but not everything was. And like Daisy and I were just at vintage shops in upstate New York before shooting, and looking on Amazon to get all of our outfits. And so it was a very collaborative process. It was just a wild experience in comparison to working on a TV show that's, incredibly structured. So yeah, we were able to have a lot of flexibility in our shooting schedule.
In a very weird way, would you have liked to have done this on a series on Hulu or even Netflix? I mean, to extend this storyline and get deeper into the characters? No?
It was very stressful to play a believable 65-year-old woman and not do it with a shtickness to it and to have it believable. But there's this aspect of is Anya faking it? And
right.
To teeter that line between, is there any twinkle in her eye that's like, I'm fooling him? So it's approaching. I approached the mindset ultimately like she was Tracy, but I also had to keep that in mind. So no, I like that this was a Coke bottle situation. It's a fever dream, and Kyle has many. I think he's got 2 kids, 2 dogs. I've got my baby, my little dog at home. Laurence and Daisy, they had. I don't know how much I should be able to share without them being here, but they dated. They met during COVID.
Wow.
One of their first big projects as a dating couple, just courting each other, was writing this and walking in the woods and orating it to each other about what makes them just sort of either have holes in their childhood or things that make them nervous, and playing to a lot of insecurity essentially, and not being able to let go of the control. So that's why a lot of people are scared of things like Cybacillin and what they'll find if they do let go of the control. So that was where this movie was born. And then they're just I met both of them. They're the exact same energy. And then when we went to New York, I was living in a van at the time. I lived in my van for 13 months full time. And so Laurence came to my van in Topanga under these sycamore trees. And I turned my captain's chair around, my passenger seat, and he sat in the passenger seat, and I sat on my bench. I had my lagoon table and a piece of raw edge wood as my table, and that's where we talked about these characters. And so, from the beginning, and this was on a hippie commune in Topanga that I lived on I rented out my house in normal Los Angeles for a year. So. I'm not necessarily this hippity dippity girl, but I sure was playing the part of it. And so we all, Kyle loves hiking in the outdoors, and so does Laurence and Daisy. And then by the time we got to New York, they were engaged, and I was like, I'm not shocked.
Wow.
So they are quite the couple that to film a movie together while you're engaged is really stressful, and to wear that many hats that they both wore.
Right.
And everyone was exhausted. So no, I'm happy it stayed a movie, but I made really good friends in the process. All of them are so lovely.
Wow. Holland, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Thank you. You're so sweet, Arrow. Thank you so much. I love your name.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Okay.